Okay, everybody take a seat, please. Right, okay, so let's get started. Welcome to an introduction to Chef. Just for show of hands, who here knows anything about configuration management? Puppet, Chef, Chief Engine, Puppet?
With Chef, but I work with Ansible
Ansible and Ansible. A lot of Ansible, nice. Right, so Ansible's Python and Chef is just as Puppet is in Ruby. Anyway, we'll get to that. Introduction to Chef. Let's start with who I am. I am the engineer. For every gamer out there, you probably know him. If you're not a gamer, well, who cares? Basically, I like to build infrastructures for big companies. I always do this with configuration management because who really wants the bother of having to SSH to each machine and fix the stuff manually when you can just do it automatically, right? I have a couple of ideas about what software should be and infrastructure, etc., and IT in general. I try to stay technology agnostic because your solution today will probably not be the solution tomorrow. And I also know I don't have all the answers. So if there's a question, I'll try to answer it as best as I can. However, if somebody else comes along with a better answer, you should be perfectly capable of accepting that you're wrong and somebody else knows a better answer. So I'm trying to stay technology agnostic and not jump to conclusions when somebody comes with a challenge. This also means I am not a preacher. So currently today we're talking about Chef. I will try and tell you why Chef is awesome. I will not tell you Chef is more awesome than Ansible or Puppet or whatever other configuration management system. Because I've got experience with a couple of them. I like them all. Each of them has their downfalls. Each of them has their bonus points. So I'm not a preacher. I'm just talking about what Chef is today, and I'm hoping to get you guys interested at least. Coming back to the keep calm and admit you're wrong. Because most likely, most of your decisions, because you don't make big decisions every day, you mostly make small decisions, will be invalid in about 6 months. Maybe to a year, but after a year you're probably going to look back on your decision on how you solved a particular problem and going to come to the conclusion it is not correct anymore or doesn't fit your needs. So I also firmly believe that you should be able to say this about yourself: I was wrong. I was right at the time, but now I'm wrong. Most importantly though, I firmly believe that if you are not enthusiastic about your software or what you're building, you should stop and do something awesome. Because what you're doing should inspire you and it should be awesome, basically. So those are my beliefs. That's who I am in short. Socially, I'm married to my wife. I've got 2 children. So my current status is lacking in sleep. But we'll probably work. So this talk is a quick introduction to Chef. I'll do a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation and I'll tell you a little bit about the high levels of Chef and hopefully get you interested. Then I'll show you a demo of how you can use Chef, how you can use it to develop locally and then upload it to a Chef server and use that to actually build something. What this talk is not is me talking about what the best solution to whatever is. Because that's, again, dependent on what your question is. Also, I won't go into the nitty-gritty of Chef. There's a lot of nitty-gritty stuff. Some awesome, some not so awesome. But we'll stick to the top level so you can at least get an idea of the architecture behind it. Also, this is not a discussion board about which CMS is best or why or whatever. We're just talking about awesome stuff. So what is Chef? Well, most of you here know about configuration management. I don't know if everybody online knows anything about it, so we'll just quickly go over that. Configuration management came from the problem where you had a lot of servers like this, and then your boss came to you managed all those servers manually, and said, please change this on all servers, which kind of led to, this. Turns out this isn't really helpful, or doesn't make you happy. Isn't awesome in the least. And configuration management is an idea that many startups started with, and they wanted to change it to this. One guy just managing it all, because really you can. I don't say you should, but you can. Quickly about what Chef provides. It's idempotent. Don't know if you know what idempotent means, but if you look it up on the internet, this is one of the pictures you get. So let's skip this and go to an actual image we can all relate to. Idempotency, in general, means laziness. Let's all assume we're all proper engineers here. We're all lazy, right? I mean, I don't want to do boring stuff the same every day. I want to automate it away to a script or whatever. So idempotency is laziness in your code. It means that, let's say we have a file statement which creates a file at a certain point with a certain chmod and a certain owner and a certain content. Chef will first run, see the file isn't there, create the file with the content, with the owner, with the chmod, all as you set it up. Next time it runs, it'll see nothing's changed, it won't do anything. However, if somebody manually went on there, which you shouldn't, and changed a file to a different chmod, then Chef will run the next time and it'll change it back. This is the same for most configuration management systems. So I'm not saying this is specific to Chef, but Chef also does this. Chef consists of a couple of components. And I've gone ahead and just mapped them to things in a restaurant because, well, Chef kind of does that as well. So most important is the Chef server. We'll put him on here as the manager. The manager provides the Chef with everything he needs. He provides the Chef with ingredients. In this case, that would be variables in any kind of form. Variables that are specific for a certain server, but we'll get to that. Cookbooks on what it should do. Recipes in those cookbooks to what it should actually do. And it keeps track of authorization, authentication, etc. Who can enter the restaurant, who can't. And who can order what stuff, because he's nitty like that. Anyway, that's the manager, that's the Chef server. Then we have the Chef himself. Basically in the Chef framework, each and every server has its own Chef. It's a Chef client. It'll get its cookbooks from the manager along with the ingredients and cook up something awesome. So we've got our cookbooks. This is an actual term from Chef, by the way. A cookbook is where you store your recipes, where you store extra attributes, values. We'll get to that. We'll actually show you what a cookbook looks like, what's in there, what's not, etc. So a cookbook contains recipes, and those recipes will then state what actually needs to change. How would you cook your meal? Then we've got our ingredients. They're not actually called ingredients. I just found it to be, let's name it ingredients. It's just attributes. And these attributes can come in a couple of forms, namely data bags, roles, and node attributes. Don't worry about them now. We can get to that later. Just know that Chef can provide variables for a server run. And it actually does that because it's really necessary for each server to have their own specific set of variables available. Next to images, kitchen. Chef needs a kitchen. In this case, kitchen is something you run locally. It's a tool that enables you to develop Chef. And then we have knife. Knife is your favorite command if you ever start working with Chef. Because seriously, who wants to go to a GUI and click? That's what knife is for. Knife is your command line interface to the Chef server. And it automates some arbitrary tasks like generating a template for a cookbook that you're going to work on next, for instance. Knife is a very powerful command. Together with kitchen will be all you need on your local machine to properly work. One moment, people. Okay, so to understand something about Chef, we need to jump in how a run works. So we'll skip all the funny names, so we'll actually get down to what happens in a run. And I decided to just get this image and go over it because it's a lot clearer than trying to recreate it in smaller images. So let's just go over it. Remember, a Chef client runs on a server and it talks to the Chef server. So first we have the Chef client up there. It gathers facts about itself. If you've used Puppet, it's Factor, but for Chef. OHI is the process that gathers system variables, such as base architecture, OS type, IP address, host name, everything. And it just merges that with information in the client.rb, which is a specific file which defines for the Chef server what this Chef client is. The name of the Chef, for instance. So it gets its configuration data for itself. It gets which server to talk to, and then it authenticates. So first call to the Chef server, it goes, hey, here I am, can I do this? Chef server goes back, yes, you can do this. It starts to rebuild the node object. Node object immediately deep into the Chef. We'll get to that. It's just the final mix of all the variables that you get, that you can actually use. If this gets some questions, please bear with me. It'll be clear after the demo. So build the attributes. Let's just call it variables. Get all the variables. Get the run list. Run list is which recipes am I going to apply. Synchronize the cookbooks, because each recipe is in a cookbook. And that means that the cookbook needs to be locally on the Chef's client for it to run. So it downloads the cookbooks from the Chef server. Then it resets the node attributes for whatever is not, I forget the word, immutable. Some variables are immutable. Everything that's not immutable is overwritten at this point with the proper variables. Then it compiles. So it builds all the recipes together with the attributes into actual code, and then it'll run it. It'll converge the node, meaning it'll put the file where you want it with the correct chmod, the correct owner, and the correct content. Eventually, after that's done, you get your update of the node object, which is all your variables at the end of your run. And those objects get uploaded to the Chef server. That means that at any time, talking to the Chef server, you can get the variables that were last used on a run for any client. And it also states back to the Chef server whether or not there was any problems, if everything went flawless or not, etc., what went wrong. And if you want, you can send emails, log files, whatever. After this, it'll wait. Usually, what you usually do is maybe an hour or half an hour, and then it'll run in the cron job, and it'll start again and do the same thing again. And hopefully, it won't change anything, because probably it shouldn't. If it does, then either somebody's been a cowboy or your code's wrong. So I can imagine this throws some questions. Main thing to get from this is that all this in the middle is executed on the node. That means that if you have any arbitrary Ruby code, that it gets executed on the Chef client, which is pretty awesome, because then you can iterate over files that are not actually managed by Chef and still do something with them. So for your local Chef development, which is what you really need to start doing anything interesting, you install the Chef DK, which is the development kit. You can just download it, get the latest version, it doesn't really matter, which provides you with kitchen and knife. Well, we already shortly went over it. Kitchen is your kitchen, right? Where awesome stuff gets cooked up. And your knife is your command to actually do interesting stuff with the Chef server. It's awesome because compiled code will run, or code will compile and run on the client. I don't know if anybody here ever uses the purge function for a directory statement in Puppet, for instance. What that basically does is say to Puppet that any files in a certain directory should be deleted if they're not managed by Puppet. Really powerful if if you want a certain conf.d there to be specifically what you state in your Puppet run. However, Chef doesn't provide anything like this. It does provide Ruby, so you can just write it yourself. In one instance, for example, we at one of my customers use a monitoring system. I don't want anybody to write their own monitoring scripts without doing that via Chef. So I write an array, and each array entry will be the name of a check. And I'll map those checks to the files in the conf.d directory of this management system, this monitoring system, and I'll kick out anything that's not in that array. because you can just use Ruby for that. You just go dir find or dir all and list over them. Extending it is moderately easy. We already went over Ruby. It's awesome because it's Ruby. And Ruby is basically English, so you can just read it and write it pretty quickly. Extending it is moderately easy. I'm saying moderate here because out of the box, if you've never used this before, it's going to be daunting to write your own LWRPs, which is a name you'll run into sometime later if you use this. However, if you get past the first kinks and it's only a small couple of speed bumps, then you'll actually be flying and building awesome extensions to Chef. Also, there's a big community behind it. A lot of code is already written. If you want to roll out a MySQL server, please don't bother and just look at the available cookbooks, which are available in supermarket.chef.io, because why not? Lots and lots of community cookbooks. So downfalls. Cowboys. Seriously, if your team has a lot of cowboys, either enlighten them or don't use this. Because you have the kind of cowboy that just SSH to a machine, it does a change, and then whatever configuration management you use comes back again, changes it back, and half an hour later it's done. And the cowboy will get this lesson learned eventually, hopefully, or you should just fire him. But you also have the cowboys that actually do know how Ruby works, and they write horrible stuff in Ruby, in Chef, which works for their specific case. But if you're not all on top of exactly what's being written in your cookbooks, then this can be a pitfall. However, if you work together as a team quite well, then this is certainly a tool worth looking into. So let's look at a demo. Usually I use Atom, but I can only share one screen at a time. So we'll stick with the terminal and Vim, because we're diehards. We have our knife command. Straight. More. Yeah? Awesome. Okay. Couple of files here. I went ahead and set up a local cookbook. All I did for the ITGilde web cookbook is knife cookbook, and I forget what you can add to it, so just knife cookbook, enter. And I went knife cookbook, create, ITGilde web, -o for which output directory do you want. I want it here, please, and it will create this ITGilde web directory. As you can see. I prefix this with ITGilde because usually when you do your own local development or you do your development for your own company, you usually prefix your cookbooks with the company you're working for. Because, for instance, you write an SSH cookbook. Maybe you want to use the community SSH cookbook as a dependency, then you've got a clash between two names. So if you're using a community cookbook in your own cookbook, it's best to just prefix your private cookbooks with a name. Let's look at the what we've got here. We've got our Chef repo. Chef repo is just a directory that I created. It's mostly used as a backup of what's on your Chef server, and it's only there so you can locally develop. What we do with one of our customers, one of my customers, is we export all the Chef information. So that's roles, environment variables, data bags. Again, we'll get to that. Just all variables, and put them in the Chef repo locally. It's a Git repository. You can just check it out, which means you can always use your kitchen environment with the proper variables that are available to each and every other server. For instance, we have a role here with nothing in it. But if I ask knife to list all the roles, this is the wrong one. You did not see this. There's no roles because I haven't uploaded it yet. What do we call it? We called it role ITGilde web. You get a basic boilerplate of a default role. Exit out of it, it gets uploaded to the server. Now if I do a role list, we have our role. Role is just something you can include in your run list for your Chef client run, and it'll provide variables. So let's look at the Chef repo again, and the roles. So currently it's empty, but you can start adding variables here. Let's say hostname, blah. This is all JSON. It always uses JSON, so get with the syntax. Took me an afternoon to struggle with the missing of the trailing comma, but you'll get used to it. Also, changing a file here only does anything for your local kitchen, nothing for the Chef server. If you want to do anything with the role we just edited, we just go knife role edit in the proper directory. My local has some issues. Anyway, let's continue. Did I create capital W? Oh, right. Very sharp. You all passed. Anyway, so this is, you get a Vim editor. Actually, what you get is whatever editor you set as your environment editor variable. As soon as you exit out of this, it'll immediately upload it to the Chef server, and it'll be live for the next Chef run. So also knife is a very powerful command, which is why you start using with your Chef repo locally and eventually start working on live roles. So we've got our Chef repo with some variables. We've got our Vagrant file, which I'll be using as a sort of server in an actual data center later. It's just for the test. We've got our Fabian minus validator.pam. The first time a Chef client runs, it needs to validate against a Chef server so that the Chef server knows this server can actually get stuff from me. This is what the validator.pam is for. It's only generated once, so if you lose it, you have to regenerate it, which shouldn't be a problem because you can. It's only used when you first roll out a Chef client on a new server again. So recreating it shouldn't be a problem. However, for instance, let's say you use a cloud and you hard code your validation PAM in your image, then you need to redo your image because your validation PAM is useless. Then we've got my fabian.pam, which is my key, which I can use to use knife to actually talk to my Fabian Met organization at Chef. I currently use the free Chef provided Chef server. It'll host up to 6 servers. After that you have to pay money. So if you want more than 6 servers, just roll it out yourself. It's free if you do it like that. And you learn more anyway doing that. But for the sake of demo, I decided, well, it might be better to actually just use their Chef server. It'll save me a headache. So then we have our knife RB, and we'll just quickly look into that. Current there is just a variable set. Log level is info. We want our log to go to standard out. What server are we talking to? Well, this is the endpoint for the managed Chef server. And then we've got our organizations, which is Fabian Met in this case. Cache type is basic file. This is just some basic boilerplate stuff. Then we have a node name. This is for me, so that Chef server knows who I am as a user. And then we have our cache options. So anytime I use knife in this directory, it'll use this knife RB and it'll be able to talk to the organization Fabian Met. I'll quickly show you what it looks like. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that. Chef Manage. Is everybody? Yeah, we had some issues with font size. So let's see if we can get this any better. Is this better? Is this viewable? Okay. So if you want to use the GUI for Chef Server, then again it's the 6 servers and then you have to pay. This is fun if you don't know what you're doing and you want to have some guides. You do this for the first month and then you start using Knife and then you find out, well, why would I want to log in if I can just use Knife? Because everything you can do here, you can do via Knife as well. So we have our notes. We currently have no notes here. Reports for previous runs. We've got some administration. And on the administration you can see there's one organization for this account, which is Fabian. Here I can reset my validation key, which we will not be doing right now. Clicking this will just give you a prompt to download the key and use that. You can invite users to your organization.
Really fast, really fast taking slowly, and you're one really fast through it, so maybe slow down a little.
Okay. Are we at administration now?
Yeah, I'm 30 seconds behind. So.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay.
Enjoy.
I am.
You are.
Okay, so quick look at policies, because that's where the stuff is that we're going to be using for our production service in a while. This is a cookbook that you get if you use learn.chef.io. And if you want to start using Chef, then please go ahead and go to that website and do that in your spare time, just because it's fun. Because in all honesty, it should be fun. If it's not fun, don't even bother. Roles, data bags, environments. Most interesting are the cookbooks. We'll get to those in a second once we actually start uploading cookbooks. So all our Knife commands actually talk to endpoints in API, and the GUI will actually talk to the same API. And then I'll switch back and go bam. A lot of swapping, but we'll get there. Yeah, so if you want to know everything that Knife can do, just hit Knife, enter. And you get a whole list and you can scroll right through it. Let's talk about Kitchen. We're currently building a new cookbook for whatever. And we want to test it out. So let's go to ITGilde web. And let's go over what actually is in a cookbook. Are we... At the top is a Burks file. We haven't seen Burks yet. Burks is a command that's in the Chef DK development kit. It will resolve dependencies in cookbooks for you, because cookbooks can have dependencies. If you write your own cookbook which is dependent on a public SSH cookbook, for instance, then it will manage that for you and upload that dependency to the Chef server as well. It makes your life a lot easier. It's really simple to use as well. It creates a log file for the first time you use Burks install. You've got Burks install and Burks upload. And those are really the two first commands you should be using. It'll create a Burks file log. Just go ahead and do Burks install first. There's only one cookbook in the entire dependency tree for this, which is ITGilde web, which is itself. And it'll say, okay, we're using 0.1.0, and we can go ahead and upload that. Yeah. It'll use the one that's in the current directory, and otherwise it'll default to your home directory, and seeing as I'm working 40 hours a week at that. So, going further, we've got our changelog and readme. These are just boilerplates. There's nothing interesting in them yet, but please go ahead and fill these in according to the boilerplate if you actually start doing anything interesting in your cookbook. Because otherwise somebody else is going to read it and is going to run into issues. So we have our attributes directory, one of the most interesting ones immediately. This will list files with a .rb syntax. And you can put attributes in here that you're going to use, variables, so to speak. So we'll get to that in a second when we actually start doing anything. Good to know that any file you place in attributes with a .rb syntax will be merged into one single variable tree. So it doesn't matter what you call the file, it's just for us humans to actually understand which is where. You could all place it in one file called default.rb, for instance, but please don't, because really, if your cookbook grows, it starts to become a headache. We've got our definitions. That's not interesting for now. That's a little bit more high nitty-gritty. It's when you start talking about LWRPs, etc. We've got our files with a subdirectory of default. This is interesting because if you try and use a file with a certain path in Chef, it'll first try to find it in the default directory. If it can't find it there, it'll search for the CentOS 6 directory, for instance, because this will be a CentOS 6 machine. And you can use this to create directories for certain operating systems, and it'll look through those directories to find the proper one. Mostly you'll just use default because I hope you don't have too many operating systems flying around in your environment. And there's nothing here because we don't have any files yet. But this is where you store files that are not changed. So just for the content. No variables in the files are changed. It's just the content of the file. You can use this for SSL keys or whatever. Then we've got our IFRB, which we're skipping. We've got our libraries, which is again a very nitty-gritty thing. We're skipping that as well. Providers, same thing. Recipes, interesting. Because the recipes is what we went over earlier, is where we actually do things. Sorry, going too fast again? Or? Okay. Cool. Cool. So let's have a look at our default.rb. This is default boilerplate, gets generated when you do the knife cookbook generate of create. This is to show how easy it is to create a file. Looks very much like Puppet, looks very much like Ansible. Not so sure about Salt, but seeing as Ansible is based off Salt, so I think it's probably the same. You've got your file statement with a path, and you've got your options for that file statement. If you want to know which options you can have available, you can always go and go to the Chef documentation. They've got some really good documentation on what's able to be used for file statement, etc., etc. We talked earlier about cowboys. This is a perfect example why it can be done, why you should train your cowboys to not do this. This is a very basic example, but trust me, it can get a lot uglier than this. So up here we have a file statement, which is nice. It's very clear. It's a file with a certain directory, of a certain owner, certain group, certain mode. It should be created if it's not there. It should be enforced that it's the same, and that's it. And the content should be blah. I could also open a file on the temp_something.txt as write in Ruby, truncate that file if it's already there, write bloop, and then close it. Let's see if this works. So immediately into the kitchen. We've got our kitchen file. I'll quickly show that first. We're going to be using Vagrant to provision this box. This is all kitchen specific, so if you want to know what you can put in here, there's multiple drivers available. You should also always look at the documentation on what suits your needs. We're going to install Chef Omnibus this version. Chef 0 is a Chef server that runs in memory for your kitchen. So with this you can work with Chef as if you're actually talking to an actual server, which is nice because if you can see here, environments, data bags, roles, I just point them to a path, the Chef repo that we talked about earlier, and it should use those for variables. So actually Chef 0 will be Chef server in memory. It'll load everything in the environments path, database path, and roles path, and it'll provide those variables to each node. We're using one platform with CentOS 6.6. We'll use the private network of what you can see there. And we define one suite, which we call ITGilde Web. The host name is ITGilde Web -11001. We add a run list. So immediately you see here a recipe and a role. So roles we went over earlier quickly. It's just a set of attributes. And a run list, or a recipe, is what it's actually going to do. You already saw this recipe, because even though it doesn't say default at the end here, default is the one that's run if you call the name of the cookbook. The name of the cookbook in this case is ITGilde Web. There is only one recipe which is called default.rb currently. This means that if I call this recipe, it'll call ITGilde Web default.rb. It'll append the variables in the role. It'll set an environment testing. And it'll set an extra attribute called def mode is true. So we can see it's not created yet. Let's go ahead and create that. Kitchen converge. There's not much on here yet, so it's hopefully pretty quickly. While this is running, we'll just quickly look at our recipe again. So we're expecting two files. One is called temp something, one is called temp something.txt. Kitchen can get a bit slow at times because Kitchen will start the VM. I already did this once, so the actual Vagrant box is already downloaded. However, it'll start a virtual machine that doesn't have Chef installed yet. So then it'll go ahead, go to that machine, and try a couple of ways to actually download Chef and install it on the machine. So sometimes, if your network is slow, this can take a while. So we have our converge, which will run the run list that we just showed. We have a kitchen login that we can use to log in. You all see Vagrant. You all probably know Vagrant as a tool, I hope, by the way. So this is a Vagrant machine. Let's have a look at temp. We've got one something, which is blah. We've got one something.txt, which is bloop. So both ways work. Please only use the first. Don't use the latter. The fact that you can use Ruby locally is a gift. Don't abuse it. Let's go ahead and go out of this. So at this point, I'd like to ask you guys if you have an idea about something simple to quickly build. Let's see how easy it is to get started. I was going to go ahead with an Apache one, but if you have any other ideas, please shoot. Anybody?
Do you have another additional user to visualization?
Sure. Do you want just one user?
Or one with just users?
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and do something then. Just swapping screens, guys. Ugh. This is readable, right?
Yes.
Cool.
A remark online. Apache is fine.
Okay. Well, we'll do Apache and install a user along with it. I use Atom.
Or simple entity.
We'll start with Apache. Okay. So I use Atom because I like working to be simple, and I always used Vim as an IDE, but Atom is pretty cool. So, not saying you should use this, I just use it. It's got tab completion. Let's have a look. We need Apache. We're running CentOS, so it's HTTPD. It needs to be installed. We can add a version here, but then I need to look up what exactly is the version for the current repository. We'll just use the install and get the latest one. We want it to be enabled and started. And I do believe it supports the status command out of the box, so probably. So this will install Apache and start it. If you want to add a user, go ahead. What's your name? I'm Joel, right? Let's comment this out because it can figure that out on itself. This doesn't matter either. You like ZSH or Bash? Now this is the downside of the screen sharing. For everybody online, sorry, I have to swap screens every now and then.
Well, people are happy to see you every now and then.
Right. We just did some changes. We can now easily do our kitchen converge again. It'll use the code that's on my machine locally. CentOS of Apache is installed, it's started, and we have a user angel. You want proof? You get proof. As you can see here, user angel is created. We have an Apache running. This is the easiest stuff to use. It can get complicated a lot quicker, a lot faster. Let's go ahead and do something like that. And I do believe this is the correct version to use, right? Or should I use the AL6 behind it? Should I use this? Or this? I don't remember. Yeah? Okay, let's do that. I'll just quickly do this in Vim because reading. Going into the attributes. There's nothing here. We'll create a default.rb. Or actually, to stay in line with what I earlier said, seeing as we're doing something for Apache or even HTTPD, let's call it that. Doesn't really matter what you call it. We create a default variable. If you start looking into the docs, as a heads up, there are default variables, override variables, normal variables, and I think those are it, but you can set them at all kinds of levels. And if you start looking into doing some overriding of variables by setting different types of variables, you're going to run into a headache really, really soon. Because it's complicated on what has precedence over what. There's a much easier way to do this. I'll show that in a second. So let's first create a variable. We'll call it ITGilde web, so it's properly namespaced. We'll call it HTTPD version. And we'll set it to that version. I hope actually that the chef Ruby that does this underwater will actually pick this up as well, but we'll find out. Otherwise we'll just change it. So we have now a variable available called ITGilde web HTTPD version, and if you use this cookbook, this is the default. Over here. So what's different what I'm doing here? I'm stating at the beginning the node type variable. This is key, this is different. Because in the attributes I set default level variables. And these default level variables will be aggregated into one one big object called node. Node will also include your FQDN, for instance, and all your OHI, which is the factor chef thing. All those variables are available under the node object. For instance, if I want to do anything with FQDN, I can just do this. Key is that this is the node variable that I'm using and not the actual default. In the beginning of the run, it'll use all the default variables and create one node variable, one truth. Yeah, see? It's complaining about the version. Alright, yeah. Let's just immediately fix this. It was minus 47 dot. Joy? I'm not sure if that works, actually. Well, yeah, but that's the thing. I'm sorry, what's your name? Alain said, why not use star because Yum supports star? It's a good question. It's, damn it. You're not entirely certain that it uses Yum. It's using some Ruby sub something to actually do it. In that case, it's always better to be on the safe side. Okay, I did not copy it properly. Sorry about that. Odd. Let's not get hung up on fixing this. Obviously, we can state a version. However, I'm not entirely sure which version. Let's just do it something a little bit easier, because something we know that Chef actually uses is the install command. We want it to be installed. Let's change that. There we go. What I now can do, since this is now a variable, which is able to be overridden in a role, is I can set that on certain servers that have a specific extra role, that I want it to be updated or deleted even, just depending on whatever action you want for that service. Again, this is just the basic of what's possible. What you'll probably end up with is all kinds of variables for your Yum package, along with a proper version that actually does work, and whatever other options are available for Yum package that you want to be able to be changed on a per server basis. So about the attributes and the default that I was talking about, the default, the normal, and the override attributes. I'm saying that if you don't want a headache, stick with default variables. A run list, if we look at the kitchen.yaml, As you can see, we have a run list of 2. First we start with the recipe, which sets our variable to install, and then we use the role ITGilde web, which can override it. If you then want to change anything to a certain set of servers, you can just go ahead, add a new role, create that role with the chef server, make sure that this role ensures there is no Apache installed, and this way, as it goes from top to bottom, the bottom one will be the last default set. It will be the one used in the node attribute, so it'll be the one that actually does the either installing or the updating or the deleting of your HTTPD. Clear? No, a host itself defines what its run list is. You can also change this in the chef server. So if you log into the GUI, you can set a run list for a specific server. But the run list will usually include mostly one recipe. If you're writing your cookbooks right, you probably have only one recipe per server, and a couple of roles. For instance, at my current customer, we use a couple of roles where one role, for instance, will be all the web servers in an environment, and then we have a role that will define a certain subset that serves a specific application for web servers for that environment, etc., etc. And so you can do very fine-grained changes, trickle down until you actually get what you want for that specific. You also find that your roles get smaller the more specific you are, because probably you want to set a whole bunch of defaults very high in your chain, and only at the very bottom you want to change what application it's serving, for instance. Let's stick with this as a recipe to roll out. So we've tested this. We know that this works on our local kitchen box. Next step is actually making sure that an actual other server starts using this. One file we haven't talked about yet, the metadata. Metadata file defines the name of your cookbook, the version, and it can get a long description. And as you can see, this is plain Ruby as well, so you can do a lot of funky stuff here. I added one commented out line. If your cookbook depends on any other community cookbook, you can add a line here, add the name of the cookbook. This is an actual cookbook that we use with a version. So if I comment this out, I do a Burks install, it'll see, okay, well we need RabbitMQ at this specific version, and it'll install it locally. And then if I do a Burks upload, it'll upload it to the chef server, and suddenly the chef server does not only have ITGilde web, but also RabbitMQ at version 3.11. Seeing as we don't use RabbitMQ currently, that's not. However, we already uploaded our ITGilde web, as you can see. It's already at 0.1.0. If I now try and Burks upload, it'll say, well, we already have 0.1.0, so I'm not accepting this. Bump the patch level. Do an install. Every time you change your metadata, you need to do an install because your Burks file log is the file that's actually being used to upload the proper versions to the chef server. So it's bumped. We have our new code live. We've already tested it in Kitchen. So now we can start using it. It's not Vagrant Bliss. What is it again? Seeing as you never use Vagrant anymore if you use Kitchen, I'm a little bit dusty with the actual Vagrant commands. So now I'm spinning up a local machine. I haven't decided any run list for it yet. I've just decided that it needs to be there. It uses the validation.pem that I've used, that I've set locally. And in this case, Vagrant will upload that for me and will use that to validate to the Chef server for the first time. After the validation, by the way, your Chef server issues you with a PEM file, a key, and that's used for further communication. Again, here we get to the point where it's actually downloading Chef to the server, which takes just as long as the kitchen does reading. How are we on sync? Cool. Why? Kids. Obviously, this is going to take a while now. What if I tell you that honestly, this afternoon it went within a minute? Right. We'll swap over to the that one. And get that out of the way again. Yeah. Well, once it's installed, you know, it doesn't need to be installed again, so that's not a problem. It's just the first one. It'll state here that it has an empty run list. This is true because all I've set up Vagrant to do is actually install Chef and validate once onto the Chef server. Sorry guys, at the internet you couldn't actually see the terminal right now. I'll show you in a minute. We have a new node in our Chef server, ITGilde Web. And let's edit the run list. We have available roles and we have available recipes. Let's go like this. Once again, you do this for about a month. Then you get tired of using it like it's Windows, and then you start using the CLI knife command much more. Mostly because of this. So, this is our run list now. Let's run it. Oh, let's first change the output back. Hi guys. Go back to the terminal. Right, so guys on the internet, just a quick view. This is after it's downloaded, it's installing it and it does some empty lines and then it actually runs Chef. And as you can see, it complains about having an empty run list. So we've just filled that in the online GUI. We're not going to use provision anymore because the Vagrant will try to use the validation.pem, I think. Not even sure, but let's not. And let's just run Chef client. We see that the run list has changed. And we're installing Apache. And we have our user Angel. And that's basically it. This is how you start with Chef. You download the Chef SDK, you get your kitchen, you create your first cookbook, you create a kitchen file for your things, and then you just start developing. Really, just start having fun, just build things. And once everything works, you can actually upload it to a server, which you can either create yourself or rent from Chef self. Seriously though, don't. Just run it yourself if you really want to use this. And play with it. It's fun. I think that's about it, guys.
Did you put some custom Omnibus to the Vagrant file? Or Chef?
Yep. You want to see? Pretty simple. The box URL in this case is a box that's used by Chef itself. I just used it because it was available. It's just a basic CentOS 6.6 install, in this case 6.7. I set a host name for the VM, I set a private network. Chef version is latest because really why not use the latest? But you can set a version here. And then just go the provisioning path. Server URL, this one is really important because this points to the URL itself, which is api.opscode.com if you use their servers, along with my specific organization, which is Fabian Met. Yes, but I suggest you work with Kitchen and Chef Zero or Chef Solo if you don't want any server at all. I'd suggest you maybe want to run your own server in that case because it's free to run your own server and you get a lot more options. You can use variables that are available from another node, or you can, for instance, you can set up load balancers, and in your load balancer recipe you can ask Chef to list you all the web servers that you're going to load balance over with a simple query. But this is again a little bit more advanced stuff, so I wasn't covering it today. But having a Chef server enables you to ask Chef about all the other nodes in its list. So that's really powerful. And I just set a validation client name and a path. The client name is something that's set from the server, which is Fabian minus validator in this case, which is my organization plus minus validator, and where on my local file system can it find the validation.pam. So this is it really.
Question from the internet, something similar to Hera available in Chef.
To what?
Hera.
Hera. Yes and no. If you've been following, then you can see that that roles can provide the same trickle-down attribute failover or attribute what's it called again? Precedence, attribute precedence, which one wins over the other one. If you set up your roles and the order of your run list properly, then you can use roles as hero data. But no, there is no out-of-the-box Chef thing that does it as good as hero data. Any other questions from the internet? Was that answered for our viewer?
Well, now the 30 seconds will kick in because they're only getting the answer now.
All right. I'm watching the chat now too, so as is everybody else. Anybody else? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Can you say something about the network path between the workstation,
As long as you can reach the API endpoint for your Chef server, whether that is the hosted Chef server or your own Chef server, it's okay. It does use HTTPS, or it does use HTTPS, so as long as that port is able to be reached by your workstation, then you can work with it. Same goes for the Chef client. It'll just talk to the Chef server API, get its stuff, and run it. Yeah. Yeah. Gets its answer.
Okay, and your workstation doesn't need any connection to the client?
No. But I think you know that it would be easy to.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but it doesn't need to. No, no. Yeah, if you can. Sorry, just quickly repeating the question for everybody online. Question was, what was the network topology between the Chef server, the Chef client, and my workstation? And basically the answer is my workstation only needs to reach the Chef server. The Chef clients will run each half hour by default and talk to the Chef server and get the latest things. So as long as my knife command, right, so this is why I repeated the, right. Anyway, sorry. So as long as your knife command can reach your Chef server, you can work with your Chef server, and your clients will just talk to the Chef server each half hour and actually do their things. Centralized reporting. Well, you get your reports from the Chef GUI. I think you can also get them through the knife command. I'm not entirely sure though. We usually use Chef has a plugin possibility for reporting, that at the end of a run it can kick off a script with input. So if you write your own script, you can either have it send emails or log. What we do is we write a state file to a certain directory and watch that with monitoring, so we can always see which Chef server is failing. To answer a question, by the way, to answer the question about centralized reporting by Hans. Any other questions? Yes, definitely, and you probably will eventually, because let's say again, the question was, can you push multiple cookbooks to a node? You'll probably have to, because you won't write all the logic for one server into one cookbook. You might use the, let's just say you've got your Apache server. Your Apache server has Apache, but it's also got all your default admin rules, admin users. It's got your sudo rules. It maybe has an LDAP connection, maybe NTP settings, whatever you set up as common. And all these cookbooks will probably have some dependency community cookbooks. So when you eventually set your run list to a web server, the dependency check will see that it needs your common cookbook, for instance, which does all your users, which you only do once, obviously, and all the dependencies that are with that. And maybe in your Apache cookbook, you don't even want to write the Apache cookbook yourself. You can just use the community Apache cookbook and change that to your liking. You'll still use one recipe, which is the Apache, your specific web cookbook, but your specific web cookbook will call all the other cookbooks it needs to actually do the proper setup. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
How's your experience with using dependencies? When you use, for example, the community cookbook, is it safe to use and is it never deprecated in a way to break your configuration? Or
Right. Question is, I'm sorry, what was your name? Luke. Luke asked, what about dependencies? What happens if somebody uploads game-changing or game-breaking stuff, right? I think that's what it boils down to. Best practice is pinning the version you want. Just to quickly show that again, go out of this and go back to the ITGilde web one. And we'll look at the metadata. So here you'll see we use RabbitMQ cookbook, but we pin it to a specific version. So only unless I update this version, it'll use a different version.
and your experience is through that?
Yes, always pin. I'll even make it more interesting. You should pin the versions that are being used in an environment of your own cookbooks. Let's say you're working on an Apache cookbook and you've got your 1.0 or your 1.00, which is stable, which is currently running production. You're working on a patch and your patch will be version 1.0.1. If you pin your cookbook in the environment production to 1.00, it won't use 1.01 until you actually up the lock. So this way you can, for instance, have testing always running on all the latest versions of your cookbook, and then gradually upgrade it through your street to staging or acceptance or whatever it is the OTOP is for you, and eventually to production. Cool. Well, I guess that was it then. Any more questions here? Obviously that's not Peter typing, by the way. He's with us in spirit, right? I guess not. Well then, that's that. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. You can always email me via ITGilde. I think you all know the email address for that. Fabian.met@itgilde.nl, I think. Cool.
Lots of things from the internet, I guess. Thank you, Fabian.